Continuing on then, we can see that what I've done here is just to extend that walk cycle out a bit further. So after the little, attention, whatever's going on, he now continues to walk a little further still. And also has appeared in our scene this tasty morsel of something that's appeared that he's probably going to go after. So what we're going to do with his walk cycle is, as he, of course, has come out of that, is we're going to slink it off. So we're going to have him start to turn and move towards this thing so that he can have himself a little snack. Of course, this brings us to the dreaded cross-axis animation, and we've got the walk cycle all keyed up here, and what we could do is to approach this in a couple of different ways. We could just take, the main route back here for him, and just right at the very start, we could just point him at the food, so then his entire cycle is going off after it. That's okay, maybe that's fine. Alternatively, we could have him coming along straight here, and then after he comes out of this, we could key a single cycle. We could turn him, manually key him cross-axis and key into a single cycle, and then copy and paste all of that and try to offset the positions, the cross-axis positions of the top level controllers, the root item and the roots of each of the IK legs. Doable, a bit of extra work to do all of that, but not totally awful and impossible. Alternatively, we could take the walk cycle that we've already got copied and pasted in here, and we could go into the graph editor and start nudging and nudging and nudging things around to try and get him to turn. That's a lot more painful, I would reckon. I mean, we've got a good few cycles of walk coming in here. I'd estimate you'd spend a good couple of hours on that to, make it all line up just nicely and get the cross-axis animation done properly. As I said when we discussed it in the video about cross-axis animation, it's really quite tough and hard, and you will spend an awful lot of time making corrections on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the halfway lazy method, and I'm going to use the simple slide pivot control to just allow me to shift his whole rig at a certain point in time. And whilst that will of course slide him about in space a little bit here and there, and effectively just transfer a straight ahead line into a bend, we'll be able to make some little adjustments to his animation to allow for that, and that will be a good deal easier. So let's just wind to here where he's actually coming out of the whole attention pose, and let's figure whereabouts we're going to have him doing his thing. What I want to do is to grab his main global route here. I'm just going to use, rather than building the tool, I'm of course going to use the rigging toolbox version, so I'm just going to hit make slide pivot there, and that gives me the slide pivot item for him. So that's ready to go. So let's see when we want to start him turning. Well, often when a character wants to turn whilst moving, they'll turn on the foot of the side that they're moving across. So of course he's going to be heading to his left. He really wants to be turning with his left foot on the ground, not the right. So our opportunity to turn him then really is either here or here or here. So there we go. So I'm just going to go for the earliest one. So what I'm going to do, in fact, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to do it as he comes out of his little attention there. So when he's coming and doing this dip down ready to move, that's when I'm going to start twisting his motion path. So we see he just starts to slink a bit there. So I'm going to go to view 2, I'm going to grab my slide pivot item, bring it along here, and let's just rattle it in, and I'm going to just snap it to where the foot is there. So there's my position key for that. I'm going to key it so it's held in place there. Then as he starts to come round and come to his contact here, not before, but just as he contacts, I'm going to twist him like this. Not a huge amount because I don't want an awful lot of torque on that foot on the floor. So we'll have turned him a little bit there. I don't believe that's enough to... Oh no, that's pretty much pointing at the morsel almost by now, isn't it? So yeah, okay, so he's off and pointing towards the tasty morsel. He needs to go just a little bit more because he's a little off target. And so since he's in the midst of a turn, we can continue that turn on the other foot. So we'll continue this twisting as he comes across here like this. So what I'm going to do is, with my slide pivot selected, I'm going to add another slide pivot to it. There we go. I'll move this out and snap it to the position of the other foot here. Okay, we sort of wait as he shifts his weight like that, comes down, lands. We should probably continue it from almost the exact same point, so I'm going to start it here. So make sure it's key held there. And then of course as he's coming across to that next contact position there, I'm now going to just twist that and make sure that I twist it so he's now to the full-on targeting towards the tasty carcass that lies ahead. So there we go, now he's on target for where he's going. Grand. So let's watch all of that taking place from the top view here, so we can see what he's up to and how he's looking so far. So there we go, that looks reasonably okay there. Yep, that looks, reasonable. If we watch it in perspective view like this, so we can actually see how he starts to look, you will see that it looks a little weird because he's sort of drifting around rather than totally intentionally turning, and it's actually going to be easiest if I wind this back a bit so we've got more pre-roll to watch. So there he is looking around and off he goes. Okay, so that's, reasonable for now. We just need a little bit of additional work in there to tidy those actions up a little bit. So let's take a good close-up look at what we've got going on here when he does the little twists, so that we can see all of that taking place. Okay, the foot turns on the ground there. It's not hugely obvious what's happening to it. It's not obviously incorrect. There we go. We see that from the front there it looks reasonable. Just look at it again. So we see that the foot does have a tiny drift, but it's basically imperceptible, and it's once we've come up to the lift, which is of course the second slide pivot here, starting to turn. So what we're going to do is turn to the main route here. We'll see, of course, he's starting to come across like that. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll preempt this ever so slightly by starting to put additional turn on the main route like this. So of course he's sort of oversteering a little to start with. That's possibly a little fast. How many frames did I go there? Only 5. Let's make it 6. And let's also nudge him just ever so slightly sideways, so he's starting to push his weight off in that direction. This should start to give us a more compelling turn. There we see he's leading with his body, so he's pushing his body weight off to the side, so it's not just this straight linear turn. It's got this bit of overlap to it. The body starts really moving the weight as it goes along. We can perhaps, as he just comes into this passing pose here, from that point, we can again just give it a little nudge there, just a little bit of extra turn and a little bit of extra push to that side, only small, and then he can sort of oversold it just a little bit there where he's coming down now, of course, to the contact pose of the other leg before starting to finally lift up. So we see that's turning him off nicely there, and that's starting to look pretty good and natural. Of course, what we see is because of this we wind up with this foot drifting a bit incorrectly. Let's have a look. Oh no, that's okay. I thought it was sort of penetrating a little bit, but it's not. What we can perhaps do, just to give this little extra sell, is here at the passing position, we can just bring this out on the X a small amount there, and that creates the foot reaching to the side initially to, of course, produce part of the turn. And we can perhaps key a similar little thing here. So as we come over like this, at this point, the foot is further in. So again, it's coming across to try and make that contact further over to the side there. And consequently, you get this turning action coming from the legs like that. So that's worked out reasonably nicely. It is, of course, quite a shallow turn, and it's not particularly fast, you know, it's a small turning circle. But of course, as we discussed back at the beginning when we're saying about how, you know, dinosaurs' limbs worked, there would be limits on the turning circle for a creature like this anyway. It wouldn't have been able to make, you know, very quick pivots around, other than, of course, by spinning on its foot, which is debatable how it would or wouldn't have moved in that fashion. But certainly it wouldn't have been able to really, you know, twist its body to the side whilst keeping its foot planted, requiring a high degree of rotation at the hip. That would not have been possible. So what we've got here is, you know, quite reasonable, all things considered. What I'm also going to do to sell this turn a little bit more is, as he's coming round and out from his move there, I am going to push the spine over, because of course there's no reason why you couldn't, you know, bend and flex his spine. So of course we get this turning arch forming up there in the spine as he comes across, and starting to straighten himself out as he comes back into his walking line. So that gives us another nice little bit of action there taking place. So again, let's give this a little watch, see how it looks. There he is, he's up and coming across like this. Okay, I like that. That works reasonably well. It looks a little, perhaps a little snappy or a little fast, but I think perhaps that's largely just the linear shift in the keys there. And it's also, of course, the fact that he's turning as he's coming out of his up, and of course he does have a, you know, a bit of a sharp drop anyway, which we already had. So I think you'll find that once we spline that in, yeah, the main sort of pop that we see there that looks like a pop, it's not his turn, it's his body and head coming down, which does look perfectly fine when we see it in side view, of course. So that's just sort of an optical illusion of the angle. And really, I think we consider that move, that turn off, to be pretty good. So yeah, liking that all in all. So let's carry him on over to his tasty little find here. He's going to be stopping, well, probably somewhere around there. We could stop him ahead of the morsel, perhaps if this is a scene where the actual position of that thing is completely fixed, so we could erase keyframes. So that's probably what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring him to a stop right here, and so those keyframes after that I shall begin to delete. So let me just grab all of his controllers here. Now we see his keyframes in the timeline, so I'm going to come across, there's that contact, and then there's the next contact which occurs here. So I'll keep that because that's a frame that I'll edit, and then all of this stuff thereafter I'm going to delete. There we go, that's all of that gone. He's come to a dead stop there. So what we'll do is we'll alter these keyframes and change his stop to actually be a stop in front of the food item. So before we get into animating this stop, I just want to work in a couple of little things to take account of this new motion that we've put in, and of course the presence of the food item. First of all, we would suspect that, you know, even though he's walking straight to begin with, he's not going straight for the food item immediately, at least not directionally, that what he does do is, of course, clock that it's there. He does see it. So what I'm going to do is grab the head and neck controllers here. Okay, I'll leave the spine controller out of it, but I'm going to target these guys towards the food item sum. So let's get both of their heading channels. We see that the head is largely flat for most of this. I'm going to find the range up until, of course, the point where he, you know, stops to do his little, what's going on, did I hear something, which is here. Okay, so let's get this frame range there and bring those into frame. Then what I'm going to do is just come back to the start, and I'm going to grab these necessary frames here, and I'm just going to start pushing them with a bit of a offset like this, so as he is, you know, directing his attention at the food item here. Then of course, as he comes along, because he's moving in a straight line, then of course, you know, he's off target, as it were. And so I'm just going to progressively grab these and just give them tiny little nudges as he's moving along here to keep his attention focused on the target. And once he gets to about this point, I don't want to keep extending the neck over and over and over. So what I'll do is I'll just switch to the channel for the head only here, and I'll keep that just nudging just the head control. So we get across to here, got his attention going that way from the head, and also here. So there we see he's really pointing where he, oh, that's maybe a little over targeted. There we go. He's pointing his attention towards the food item the whole time as he's walking along. He has seen it. So let's just see how that's looking. I think it's pretty good. Yep. Of course, as his neck is, you know, turning to the side, we see that his head's coming off the level a little bit. So let's get the head controller and let's get its bank rotation here, and let's just make any necessary corrections to this. Again, let's look at where the last frame I would need to have that is. So yeah, there he's shifted, so it really is this flat set here. So there we are, right at the start. There we are, that brings it pretty much on the level. Now this is going to be slow and progressing over time. A lot of these in-betweens I can then take out. Let's take that last frame. There we go, dodge it as well. Let's see if there's any in-betweens when it really falls out of alignment. There's one there. Let's just keep it back like this. And there it's a little bit extreme the other way. Tilt it back. So we're just having to do this little counter animation really. And there we've got pretty much the same again, although it's lesser. That's okay. You can just tilt it back. You can see, of course, in the graph we're getting this, you know, seesaw timed in, obviously with his motion. So that's coming from the bounce there. So there we are. There's his attention. And at the minute, right, that head starts to turn very fast now. Once we get to that point, the head and neck really do rotate quite snappily. That might be a little too snappy, but let's see, because of course before it was coming from straight. Oh, actually that's not bad. That's got quite a nice little punch to it, I think. But what I am going to do is I do think I want to stretch that out. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's 3 frames, and then it's 1, 2, 3 again. So I'm just going to grab both of those for the head only and just nudge them 1 frame over. Let's see how that looks. He's starting to be a bit up at this frame now, obviously. Timing into the neck, and the same here. So what we'll do is we'll just make these. Let's just see how the timing is first. So watch it play back. Oh no, that is good. That is good timing. I do like that. Okay. It's got a bit of snap, but it's not too much. So what I'm going to do is just correct the poses at those frames. So got his head tilted more down here. There we go. There it is. Let's bring it up actually at this point. So he's more like this. Then of course he comes round like that. I can put a little in between here to raise it up. So that's now a 4 frame spacing. So I've got a little in between on the 2. Perhaps keep it down a little there. In fact, I'm going to lose that in between on the 2 because I don't think it really adds anything. Turn it up like that afterwards. And there I'm going to bring it down so it's more level like this. Does it need a bit of a twist, maybe a scotch? Okay, so let's have a look how that appears to play, shall we? Let's wind it back, and along he comes. He's looking over there. Oh, what's this? Oh, that's great. Look at that. That works really nicely. Coming along, looking at one thing. Ah, but something over to the side takes his attention. So as we see, this is, you know, adding in even a little bit more character to the whole piece, because we've initially got him looking off to his left. When something to the right calls his attention, it gives it that little bit more punch. So we'll just see it from this view here. There he is. He's definitely looking at that. But oh, what? There we go. That's really got a nice little feeling going on to it there. Again, let's take another angle. Let's come over here where we can actually see the food item in question. Let's wind it back and let's just watch all the way through here. There we go. He's very nice. What's this? Oh, something over there. Am I safe? Is everything cool? Yeah, all right. Back to the food. Again, that snap back. Is that perhaps looking a little fast now that he's turning as well? It might be. So what I'm going to do is grab the head and neck here. Let's look at their frames. We've got him down there. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, let's bring that head and neck movement one frame later. And let's also oversell it. So the neck weaves a little bit over like this. The head, of course, stays a little more corrected. Thus, then the neck is still a little bit pushed over here. And the head like this. So that gives it a little smoother correction there. We'll just, of course, keep his focusing in on the item that he's probably planning to eat. There we go. So let's have a little look at that. Has that improved? Yes, that's definitely improved. Okay, good. It's not so sharp, not quite so fast. There we go. I do like that. So at that point where his neck's really over to the side here, I really do want to keep that head turned there, and also here, there, wasn't quite turned enough. So he's really keeping his head on a swivel, so to speak. Okay, and since he's now moving closer to that food item, we want him to keep his eyes on it, so we're also going to start dropping the head rotation gradually as we approach it. So that's going to be this whole back section here on the pitch. So let's grab all of those frames, push them up slightly. We probably don't need these in-betweens here. Yeah, minimal adjustment there. So just grab here, up a bit. Well, up a bit in the graph, down a bit in the posing, of course. And so we'll just sequentially start shifting his frames like this, so as he is still keeping his eyes on what he's after. Very minor, quite subtle little adjustments, possibly beginning to, increase in angle as he comes ever closer to the prize. So there we go, just making all of these little adjustments there. Okay, that'll do, because we'll work in the rest, of course, because we're coming to this stop. So we'll work in bits like that there. And what I'm also going to do, as the head is pointing down, I'm also going to do a similar thing on the neck. So I'm going to offset its graph a little bit like this. Again, I've got some in-betweens there that I don't really need. To fill that out, frame it up. And what are we doing? So maybe not quite as soon. Maybe, let's say, from about this point onwards, he'll start to offset his neck. So there we go, neck's coming down here. And we can leave that one there. Tiny little adjustment here, tiny little adjustment here. It's really the up points where the neck is lifting up that we're starting to adjust more, really. So his neck is progressively dipping down. And we can really see the pattern without needing to particularly go through it all. Do those adjustments there like that, so we get this sort of fall off, as it were, to the position of the neck. So there we go. Yeah, getting a nice little eyes on the food there. So let's watch all of this back and see how it's looking now. So there we are. He's looking at the food, coming along, looks tasty. What's that over there? Looking around, checking that he's okay. Okay, back for my food, and over he comes. Lovely. Okay. And of course we see him now starting to focus on it. So again, we're getting that sense of intention from him. So that's pretty good. So let's also work into his turn here. Obviously we did the body and we did the legs and head and so forth. What we didn't do was the tail. So as he goes to, begin turning himself like that, I'm going to put a little counteraction on the tail, which should help to sell the motion just that little bit better. Okay, so he starts to swing that way, and what we're going to do is bring his tail across like this, initially there, and a little bit of weave that way on it here. So he's sort of countering himself, then the tail would ordinarily be swinging that way anyway. So let's just unswing it a little bit, but we'll keep the swing on the second control for it. In fact, I'm going to push this even harder that way, and then here we'll keep it pushed that away, so you see the tail sort of draws this line that he's coming around. You can push it like this. The rough idea is to try and keep the tail sort of pointing off where it was already pointing. So we'll add an in-between to it there to bring it across more. So that way it sort of traces out its previous path. And then really from this point it can whiz back the other way. Similar frame here, which means that this frame probably needs to be moved back in time slightly. 1, 2, 3, let's say. And now it does this little swing and snap, so it snaps over. Of course it'll snap back again, and so at this frame we'll just push it a little bit over that way and over that way, so it's got a little bit of overswing happening in it as it comes across. Let's see how that works and appears. So let's come out here and play it, and come on, and there we go. Yep, that works nicely. Let's just take it in top view so as we can get a slightly better look at exactly what it's doing in that time. So there he is in his sort of hold. There we go. Okay, good. Should work out nicely once we get some spline action going on in there later. So let's try watching it back from this angle here. We should see that it will behave quite nicely. So there we go, as his tail as he comes to a stop. And yeah, look at that, it's got a lovely little slink on it as he comes out and does that turn, so that really helps sell the body mechanic of that turn as well. Right, finally then, we're ready to execute his little stop as he comes up to the tasty morsel. So let's work on adjusting this end keys here to really bring him in to have a little inspect of what it is and a little feast. So to start bringing him to a stop, I'm going to basically slow him down somewhat as he approaches. I'm also going to reduce his step a little bit to bring him in at a different point. Now, of course, by reducing the step, by reducing the distance that he covers in a given period of time, that will slow him down. But I'm also going to just actually slow out the timing as well, so his entire timing begins to drag and slow. So what I'm going to do is select all of his controls here. I'm going to look at the point where I want to begin his slowdown, which I think I'm going to take it from a nice straight point to do. So we see we've got the contact pose of a foot coming in there at frame 268, so that's going to be my base frame, if you will. I'll open up the graph editor here and get all of the channels on all of the items and fit them in view there. And we'll just select, chunk here and frame them so that we can see them. And I'm going to then just select the keys from 268 onwards. I'll use the scale tool and holding down the control key, so as I scale time, I'm going to just drag nice and gently until I see it pop. There it pops once, and I think I'm just going to pop it twice. And let's see how that looks. One thing that you can do, of course, is whilst you're doing this, you can play it back at the same time in order to experiment with your amount of slowing. And let's just see if I want to go a little bit further than that. I don't think I do. Let's see how that looks. That's starting to get too slow now. So I'll just undo that. Because, of course, I'm going to reduce the amount of distance that he travels on these last steps. That'll slow him down an extra chunk as well. So having him as slow as I've got him here is probably the limit of what I want to do by stretching my keyframe time. Okay, so that's a good start there in beginning to slow him down as he approaches his little food. So what I'm going to do is it's going to be pretty much at this point that I'm going to start to shrink his distance. So first thing I'm going to do is grab this foot control here, and we're going to shorten his step at that point. So we've got his foot, and it's coming up to here, and so I'm just going to drag it back in position to here. I'll just give it a little bit of additional drag back at the passing pose there. So he still comes up and stops here. Okay, so we adjust the main root in kind. So we'll drag that back at this point as well then. We'll take the other foot now, which is, of course, stepping through. Obviously, I've only adjusted that one key on the root, so it's still overstretching a bit there. Don't worry about that. And where it impacts, or touches down rather, we'll bring that right back to somewhere around here. See how that works in a moment. So, of course, bring the passing position a good deal back as well. So there we've got his shortened stepping action like that. And we might change the timings of those keys as well. First of all, let's just work on the root here. So we've got that in between where he goes down. I'm just going to delete that and we'll create a new one at some point. And I'm going to grab this frame here, and of course pull him backwards a bit more, and of course this frame here, pull him backwards, and we'll get him into the point where he should be, you know, sort of central-ish over his feet. And there seems to me to be a pretty decent standing sort of spot. Maybe we'll just have him a little further back, and then that foot will land more here. So there we go, he comes in and slows and slows. Good. So, of course, a little bit floaty at present. Don't worry, we'll fix that. First thing, well, we want to speed up the movement of this foot now, so it comes to lift off. Just grab all of the control items, of course, that are happening in our foot there. And I'm going to bring this, actually I'm going to leave that at 3, because I don't want to speed that up and make it seem like he's really snapping his foot off too fast. We might adjust it afterwards. So I'll grab the later 2, where that's normally 6, I'll bring it down to 4. So that comes in here. And then the very final key, normally be 7. I'm going to make that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's just see how that sort of plays out in playback. Ah, there we go. That is a nice, swift little move there. What we can do as well, we don't need to bring it up as high on the passing pose. So that can come down there. Obviously, it's not going as far forward from the passing pose, so I'll just bring the passing pose back a bit as well, like that. And of course, we'll do the step down on the toe here. Do it in 2 frames and just reset that. Okay, I've still got a little drift key here on this toe. That's fine, I'll just take both of those out. So of course he's not going to lift that foot back up again. Now this foot was also shortening its distance of travel, so I'll just speed it up ever so slightly as well. Just grab those controls there. Give it to the passing pose the same time, but we'll just grab basically this whole lot here and just bring them in by 1 frame. What we can also do, because he's not taking a big stride, we don't need to be raising the foot here up as swiftly, but before I do that I'm just going to grab the foot and all of its associated controls here, and since this foot has landed sooner, I'm going to move that foot sooner, so I'll just drag that whole block there back by 1 frame, and then this I'll just keep flat at that point, so he really only turns it as he comes to lift it. So let's see how that works. Ah, nice little foot action. There, comes in for a good stop, and that last foot there really just, you know, flicks over to bring itself sort of level. Really like that timing. Okay, so let's work on the other parts then. Come to the root. I'll move it backwards slightly at this frame here at the passing pose. So we're slowing there. I'll also let it come backwards a little here at this step. So that gives him just a little bit, you know, additional space to move forwards. We'll let it come back a little scotch there, down like that. See what sort of a difference that has made, because it is of course quite subtle. Ah, but there it is, and look at that, that's really nice now. He really begins to slow his body and comes into his leg rest like that. So that's good. So of course we'll have him contacting there, 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll still have him do a little dodge down, of course, as he takes his weight there. Doesn't need to rise up quite so high on the next frame. Of course, that dodge down that he takes, you might say, well, that's a bit extreme, but he's sort of slowing himself, so he's letting his legs catch the weight of his body and, you know, absorb out some of its momentum. That helps him to slow himself down. Certainly doesn't need to come up as high here, because of course pushing himself up too high would imply that he's propelling himself forwards again. So what we can see is we get to here where that foot comes down, hip slides in, as well as moves down slightly. And then over the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I reckon, we can actually have him just drift back a little bit. So a little bit of, overlap, sort of anti-follow through as he comes to rest. Is it a bit much? Let's see. Possibly a little strong, or perhaps a little slow. In fact, let's just make it 4 frames, see if that's any better there. Yeah, that's better. Should be a shorter little snap. It's not so much the distance, although it is slightly the distance and the time. So let's bring it to 3, and let's just make the actual amount that he has shifted back that much smaller. So that's just a tiny, tiny little adjustment that we get made after he comes in for his landing. Watch that through. There we go. That's reasonably nice. And what we'll do is we'll put a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say, and that'll give us a place where we can have that action splining across. So all in all, pretty good. There was a little adjustment I saw in the feet here that I think is worth making, which again is this toe and how quickly it starts to come up, because we are, moving not quite as swiftly now. I think I can push those frames out, let's say by 1. That means that his toe remains flatter longer. So his toe doesn't actually start to pivot up here on his left side until his right side has pretty much completely come down. So it's just that last little click over at the exchange point there, you see. That should be a little bit more natural there. Very nice. We'll also be bringing him down. So of course, as he's coming into land, his body can begin to flatten out. So let's just grab the pitch channel here on the spine, have a look at the section that we've got, and we see that he's, that's his dip down here. So what we won't have is we won't have as much of a dip up. I can get rid of that in between. This dip up can thus become a lot shallower. That dip down can also become slightly shallower at that point. So we're getting a reduced action into the body there. Of course, by here having a even more drooped position like that, so he's sort of bringing himself down and ready to rest. And what we'll also do is start to add some pitch rotation here to the main root item, because of course that'll just turn his entire body forwards. So let's grab those last frames there, and let's see the point at which we want to come into that. I think really from here, so let's just grab that. Ooh. Let's make that adjustment very small, shall we? Because I'm working on a flat line here. So there we are, let's bring that down less. So we get a small little dip there, and let's just ease it out like that. So of course he is dipping in very slowly. Bring him. There we go. Nice little rest out on the spine and the body there. So let's play it. Yes, see, it's really bringing himself down into a, right, here's my tasty thing sort of position. We do the same with the neck, so I'll find its pitch here so that we can begin to bend that down a little bit. So coming to here, that will be, I'm going to say that's going to be really the last up. Of course, this down here shall have to be somewhat extended, and then this will have to be also quite greatly extended. So there we go. Something like that. Yeah, so we really see he's bringing his head in as he comes to the stop there. We'll just go 6 frames out from this last frame on the neck. So of course that's after the root has come to rest there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've really got his neck at this point down. We've also got the spine even further down. If we look at the head, that's pretty good as it is. We'll start to actually at this point have it sort of leveling off a little bit, so it's sort of just counteracting what's going on there in the body. So we should see that we're coming in, and that's reasonably nice and reasonably smooth there. Perhaps a little slow, so that frame here for the head, neck and spine, I'm just going to bring that down by, let's say 2. See how that looks. Is that better? I think it is. Might even want to go a little more than that. See how we're looking here. Okay, that's a bit more like it. What we'll do at this point is we'll come out another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 key there, and then of course at this point that we've got here we'll put a little bit of overshoot on it, so that lets him come down a little bit like that, bounce back up. And then perhaps the bounce back up could even be ever so slightly slower. So let's grab those, say 1, 2, 3. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to take that down point, just grab the old animation toolbox quickly, copy that pose, and then 1, 2 later I'm going to paste it so it can have that little, you know, sectioned bounce to it, and just maybe offset it a tiniest amount there, and then it starts to rise. So that should have given just a little bit of extra overlap there. Comes in. There we go. Again, I think I've just made that a little over slow, so let's just sharpen it. 2 frames down, perhaps, let's see. Yeah, okay, that's reasonably good. So let's see the whole approach. As he comes in, okay, very nice. Comes in, slows down. Still got to work on the arms there and what they're doing, and also, of course, the tail will adjust. But largely, I think that is looking quite nice. So let's just wind right back to the beginning and view the piece in its entirety here and see completely what he's doing. There he is, coming along, spotted some food. Whoop, something going on? Have I missed something? Okay, over we come, back towards the food. Food, yum. Wonderful. So, really nice. Liking what we've got here. It's looking pretty sweet, natural. We're really getting the sense of this, you know, animal going about his business, so to speak, and, you know, thinking about food. And I think we've gone certainly from, you know, just another boring walk cycle again into starting to take the animation somewhere else, you know, add more life and character to it here. At this point then, it's probably another good spot to take a break and wrap this video up, and we'll continue our animation even further, adding more stuff to it, more life in the next.